After pulling into the driveway on Friday evening, I was ready to enjoy a weekend of relaxation. As I walked through the door, however, my wife's demeanor immediately set me on edge. She wasn't her usual self. There was no welcoming smile, no warm greeting. Instead, she looked agitated, as though she had been waiting for me with something she couldn't hold back. I greeted her with a straightforward question. "Where are the kids?" It was Friday. They should have been home. She hesitated, then told me they were staying with her mom until Monday. That was unusual. Before I could ask more, she cut in, saying, "We need to talk." There was an unsettling determination in her voice as she said it. She claimed it wasn't anything negative, but admitted it might be hard for me to understand. Then she added something that made me stop in my tracks. "If you love me, you'll hear me out." Her preamble was enough to tell me this wasn't going to be a typical conversation. I folded my arms and told her to get to the point. After some hesitation, she finally said it. She wanted to be with other men. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline to this bizarre joke, but it never came. When I asked her bluntly if she was thinking of ending our marriage, she insisted she wasn't. "I love you," she said, "and I'll never leave you. This is just something I need to do for me." For a moment, I simply looked at her. Then I asked, "Do you hear yourself? You think I'd allow something like this?" My tone was sharp, leaving no room for ambiguity. She began rattling off explanations, saying it wasn't about love, only physical exploration. She claimed she had been thinking about it for a long time, that she had never experienced being with anyone else because we married young. She spoke as though I should sympathize with her situation. I cut her off mid-sentence. "Let me make something crystal clear," I said firmly. "You're talking about betraying this marriage. You're asking me to sit back and watch while you tear apart everything we've built." Her response was defiant. "This isn't about us, it's about me. I need this." I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "No," I said. "You need to understand the meaning of commitment. You think I'm going to sit here and tolerate this? Think again." She seemed taken aback, as if she hadn't expected me to push back so forcefully. For a moment, there was silence. Then she tried again to justify herself, but I wasn't interested in hearing more. Without another word, I turned and walked upstairs. The marriage she had just described wasn't one I recognized, and I wasn't about to stick around and humor her delusions. Inside the bedroom, I quickly changed into comfortable clothes, a pair of jeans, a shirt, and my running shoes. Running had always been my way of clearing my head. Right now, I needed to focus and decide what my next move would be. As I came back downstairs, she was still sitting in the same spot. Her eyes followed me, but I didn't stop to acknowledge her. At the door, I paused briefly and glanced back. "You've made your choice," I said flatly. "Now you'll live with the consequences." I opened the door and walked out, slamming it shut behind me. She called after me, her voice rising with desperation, but I didn't stop. As I strode past the neighbor's house, I heard her footsteps behind me. She was trying to catch up, calling my name. Eventually, she managed to run alongside me, gasping for air as she tried to plead her case. I stopped abruptly and turned to face her. "Don't follow me," I said coldly. "You had your chance to explain. Now it's my turn to decide what happens next." Without waiting for her response, I turned away and continued walking. Her protests faded into the distance as I left her behind, resolute in my decision to take control of the situation. Cassandra's voice carried behind me as she continued to plead, insisting we needed to talk. She kept repeating that she loved me, that her intentions weren't meant to hurt me, and that we still existed. Her words meant nothing now. They were the hollow echoes of someone trying to justify the unjustifiable. She claimed this was about fulfilling a personal need, not destroying our marriage. But to me, it was clear she had already made her choice. And choices, I believe, carry consequences. As I kept walking, her voice grew more frantic. I heard the unmistakable sound of her faltering steps before she finally stopped. I didn't glance back to confirm if she had collapsed on the sidewalk. I didn't care to. Her inability to keep up wasn't my concern. I had set my pace and intended to stick to it. 2 blocks passed before I turned the corner. She was nowhere in sight. The distance between us felt symbolic, and I welcomed it. Picking up speed, I entered what I used to call overdrive during my marathon days. My stride became smoother, faster, more efficient. If I wanted, I could keep this pace for hours, and tonight, I just might. As I ran, my thoughts drifted to the beginning, when I had first met Cassandra. We'd crossed paths during a college 10K race, where she'd been handing out cups of water to runners. I won that race and, jokingly, told her later that I'd been running to catch her before she disappeared into the crowd. It wasn't far from the truth. There was something magnetic about her back then. We hit it off quickly. She worked as a secretary to the dean of the business school, a role she'd earned through sheer diligence despite not finishing her degree. Meanwhile, I was finishing graduate studies in electronics and computer science. We dated for 6 months before becoming intimate, and I still remembered how enthusiastic she was back then. Her lack of prior experience had never held her back. She'd thrown herself into our relationship with passion and energy. After my graduation, we married within months. I was 26, and Cassandra was 27, a maiden at that age, as she had once proudly told me. We built a life together, and over the years, we welcomed our 2 kids, Claire and John Jr., into our world. Life felt solid, dependable, or so I thought. Cassandra's demeanor had changed in recent months, though. She'd grown distant, quick-tempered, and unpredictable. There were moments when she snapped at me or the kids for no apparent reason. That alone had sparked arguments, but I'd tolerated it for the most part. I'd even wondered if it might be menopause, though I never got around to looking into it. That was my mistake. But what I wouldn't tolerate, was the betrayal she'd just proposed. A betrayal she somehow wanted me to condone. As I pushed forward, my strides felt lighter, stronger. The man I was now, the one racing away from her, wasn't the same man who had walked through the front door hours earlier. That man had believed in Cassandra, in our partnership, in the sanctity of our marriage. But this man? He was done with illusions. Cassandra could cry, plead, and rationalize all she wanted. It wouldn't change the fact that she had crossed a line. Not just a line, but the line. I had no intention of turning back. Not tonight, not tomorrow, and possibly not ever. I slowed slightly as I rounded another corner, catching my breath. My thoughts were interrupted briefly by the sound of a message notification on my phone. I pulled it from my pocket, already knowing it was from her. The message was predictable. Please come back. Let's talk. I stared at the screen for a moment before deleting the message without replying. There was nothing more to say. The weight of her decision was hers to carry now. As I continued walking, Cassandra's desperate cries faded behind me, and I focused on the road ahead. She could try to justify her betrayal all she wanted, but I wasn't about to let her drag me into her mess. Whatever she was going through, it didn't excuse what she'd done, or her audacity in expecting me to support it. Meanwhile, back at the house, Cassandra reached out to her sister, Roberta, for help. Roberta, who was as sharp as she was outspoken, had always been more grounded than Cassandra. Despite their close bond, Roberta often regarded her younger sister as naive, even reckless. Still, when Cassandra explained the situation, Roberta agreed to help track me down. Cassandra told her I'd headed east, wearing a dark green t-shirt, jeans, and my Cubs baseball cap. She also mentioned, with an almost performative concern, that I hadn't taken a coat despite the freezing weather. Roberta, ever practical, told Cassandra to stay by the phone in case I called, then set out to find me herself. The roads were slick with ice, so Roberta drove cautiously. About 10 miles out of town, her phone rang. Pulling over to answer, she learned I'd been spotted in Baxter, a tiny town barely on the map. Without hesitation, Roberta redirected her route and headed straight there. By the time Roberta arrived in Baxter, I'd found a small diner to warm up in and grabbed a hot meal. The place was quiet, with only a handful of locals. I wasn't hiding, but I wasn't making myself easy to find either. I needed space, and the solitude of the moment gave me clarity. When Roberta eventually located me, her expression was as sharp as ever. She wasted no time. "You proud of yourself, John?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I leaned back in my chair, unfazed. "Let me guess, Cassandra called you." "She did," Roberta replied. I was already out looking for you. What's going on? Let me save you the trouble, I said, my tone firm. Your sister wants to explore other men. Claims it's something she needs to do. I let the words hang in the air, watching for her reaction. Roberta's expression didn't waver, though I could tell she was processing. And you walked out? That's right. What else was I supposed to do? Applaud her? The conversation continued as Roberta tried to understand the situation. I explained everything, laying it out bluntly. She listened, her face a mask of calm analysis, as if filing the information away for later. Eventually, she spoke, her words carefully measured. John, I'm not saying what Cassandra did is right, she began. But women go through phases, hormonal changes, insecurities, fears. Sometimes those things make them act irrationally. Save the excuses, Roberta, I interrupted. Plenty of women go through changes without blowing up their marriages. She nodded, conceding the point. Fair enough. But have you considered that maybe she's crying out for help? That she needs your strength right now? I fixed her with a steely gaze. My strength doesn't involve letting her disrespect me. If she so much as thinks about crossing that line, we're done. No exceptions. Roberta fell silent, her thoughtful demeanor returning. I didn't care if she thought I was being harsh. I was done compromising my principles for someone who clearly didn't value them. After a long pause, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, and she commented on my ability to walk such long distances. It's impressive, she admitted. I shrugged. It's just who I am. Roberta gave a low whistle as she glanced at me. You walked over 100 miles in weather like this. That's not just impressive, it's insane. What were you thinking? I didn't take her question at face value. She wasn't just talking about the icy roads or the bitter cold. She was asking what was going through my mind about Cassandra, myself, and our marriage. But I wasn't about to delve into that now. Thinking isn't the point, Roberta. Doing is, I replied curtly. And walking clears my head. She sighed but let it drop. Christmas is 3 weeks away, she remarked, shaking her head. Quite the holiday you're shaping up for. Any idea what'll be waiting for you under the tree this year? The sarcasm wasn't lost on me, but I didn't bother reacting. Instead, my thoughts wandered. Was Cassandra already acting on her so-called needs? The idea of her betrayal, fully realized, fueled my resolve. There would be no forgiveness, no second chances. If she crossed that line, she'd better be ready for the consequences. I need you to drop me off at Peter's, I told Roberta as we neared the edge of town. It's Sunday, and I need some time alone to think. You can go to the house tomorrow and tell Cassandra I need space. Roberta gave me a long look, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She's worried about you, you know, she said. Maybe now that she knows where you stand, she'll rethink things. I snorted. Let's not kid ourselves. She's not exactly the picture of self-control, but she made her intentions clear. My job now is to figure out my next step. Roberta nodded slowly, her sharp features softened by something resembling sympathy. Just don't do anything rash, John. Take the time you need, but keep in mind, if there's even a chance to fix this, you'll need a clear head. I'll manage, I replied simply. After dropping me off, I watched Roberta drive away before heading into my office. The quiet hum of the building was a stark contrast to the chaos in my life. Sitting at my desk, I stared at the blinking cursor on my computer screen, my mind racing. While Roberta might think Cassandra was reconsidering her plans, I wasn't convinced. Trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. Meanwhile, back at the house, Roberta wasted no time confronting Cassandra. As she entered, shrugging off her coat, she got straight to the point. You're afraid you've lost him, aren't you? Cassandra scoffed, though her expression betrayed her unease. John will never leave me. He knows how much I love him. Roberta crossed her arms. You really believe that? After you told him you want to sleep with other men? Any man in his position would be thinking exactly what he's thinking. Cassandra's face fell, and she avoided Roberta's gaze. Did he tell you everything? She asked hesitantly. Roberta nodded. He did. And secrets like this? They don't stay hidden. You're lucky he didn't broadcast it to the whole town. I'm not trying to hurt him, Cassandra protested. I've always wondered what it would be like. I thought he'd understand. Roberta let out a humorless laugh. Understand? Cassandra, if you go through with this, you'll lose him. You'll lose your kids, your friends. Hell, even your family. Is that what you want? Cassandra's voice wavered. I don't know. It's not like I want to ruin everything, but it's been in my head for so long. I don't know if I can stop myself. Roberta stepped closer, her tone softening but remaining firm. Listen, I get it. Everyone has feelings they struggle with. But there's a difference between feeling something and acting on it. If you can't see the consequences of this, you're blind. Tears welled in Cassandra's eyes, and for a moment, she looked like the younger sister Roberta had spent years protecting. I can't lose him, Cassandra whispered. But I don't know if I can resist. Roberta placed a hand on Cassandra's shoulder. You have a choice to make. Either abandon this idea completely, or watch everything you care about fall apart. There's no middle ground here. Cassandra nodded reluctantly, her lips trembling. Roberta stayed the night, offering what little comfort she could. But even as Cassandra promised to reconsider, Roberta couldn't shake the feeling that her sister's struggle was far from over. For Cassandra, the night brought clarity, or so she believed. She clung to the hope of winning me back, her love for me still undeniable in her mind. But clarity wasn't the same as resolve, and her desires simmered beneath her surface promises. The next morning, I woke up on the office couch, my back stiff and my muscles tight. The walk had been grueling, and the couch was no substitute for a proper bed. While I'd pushed through marathon distances before, endurance walks like that weren't part of my usual routine anymore. Still, I couldn't deny a small sense of pride in knowing I could still push myself when necessary. It was a little after 10 a.m. when I pulled into the driveway. Claire and John Jr. were at school, leaving the house quiet. Cassandra opened the door before I could knock, throwing her arms around me. You're back, she breathed, her voice trembling with relief. I didn't return her embrace. Of course, I'm back. It's my house. She hesitated but didn't pull away. I was so worried, she murmured. Please forget everything I said. I was being stupid. An idiot, really. I talked to Bobby, and she helped me realize how wrong I was. I stepped back, studying her face. She looked sincere, but sincerity wasn't trust, and trust wasn't something I was about to offer freely. Is that so? I said, evenly. Yes, she insisted. I see things differently now. I know how much I've hurt you. I'll never bring it up again. I nodded, my expression unreadable. Let's hope you mean that. Stepping inside, I made my way to the kitchen. Roberta was there, sipping tea at the table, her presence both expected and grounding. Morning, I greeted her. I assume you're here to back up her story? She met my gaze without flinching. We talked, Roberta admitted. A lot. And I think she understands how serious this is now. I told her it was a dumb female head trip, but honestly, I'm hoping she really gets it this time. Is that so? I said again, my tone skeptical. Roberta's lips tightened. You've got every right to be cautious, John. I get it, but give her a chance to prove herself. I didn't respond. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. Whatever reassurances they offered, it wasn't enough to erase Friday's confrontation from my memory. Over the next few days, Cassandra worked tirelessly to convince me she had changed her mind. She cooked my favorite meals, went out of her way to show affection, and even seemed to reconnect with Claire and John Jr. It was almost convincing. Almost. But deep down, I wasn't ready to trust her. Then Thursday came, and with it a peculiar phone call. I overheard snippets of her conversation as I passed by the kitchen. Muffled words, faint background noises, and the phrase call cell. Call my cell. Something about it struck me as odd. Upstairs later, I found her phone on the dresser. The call history showed 6 unknown numbers, none of which I recognized. That was enough to light a spark in my mind. With my military background and connections, uncovering the truth wouldn't be difficult, certainly not illegal, given the phone was under my name. Cassandra might have underestimated me, but I had the tools to uncover whatever she was hiding. At work the next morning, I waited for Tim, one of our field techs and a trusted confidant. When I spotted him heading out, I called him into my office. He settled into a chair, curious but wary. What's up, John? I've got a problem, I began. And I need your help. Tim frowned. What kind of problem? The kind we handled for Mr. Peters last year. I said bluntly. This is personal, but I have my reasons. Tim's posture stiffened, and he nodded slowly. You sure about this? That kind of digging comes with risks. I'm sure, I replied. If there's nothing to find, no harm done. But if there's something, I need to know. He hesitated, then said, fine. I'll take a look, but you'll need to handle this carefully. Spot check for a month or so, then get back to me. Don't bring me anything until you're absolutely certain. I handed him the numbers from Cassandra's call log. Start here, I said. It might be nothing, but it could be everything. Tim studied the list and gave a small nod. All right, let me see what I can dig up. As I watched him leave, I felt a surge of determination. If Cassandra thought she could outmaneuver me, she was sorely mistaken. Whatever her intentions, I was steps ahead, and the truth would come out, one way or another. Life at home appeared to settle into a precarious calm. The kids were content. Cassandra was visibly trying to play the role of a devoted wife, and I feigned a sense of normalcy. But under the surface, I remained vigilant. A week later, Tim reached out, asking for a meeting at our usual spot. When we met, he wasted no time getting to the point. John, I got everything you asked for, and then some. He slid a folder across the table, his expression serious. Inside was a detailed account of Cassandra's movements. She'd been visiting 2 addresses on successive days. Tim had captured everything: photos, video footage, and audio recordings. Your wife is definitely cheating on you, he said flatly. I didn't flinch. Good. Now I need more. As much as you can get, especially video evidence. I have plans. Tim hesitated. John, are you sure about this? What if she's running some kind of setup? I smirked. She's not that clever. And I'm not taking this to court. My reasons are my own. Reluctantly, Tim nodded. All right. If you're certain, I'll keep digging. 3 weeks later, Tim delivered results that even I hadn't anticipated. Armed with a trove of evidence, I marveled at the depth of his investigation. I now knew the identities of all 5 of Cassandra's lovers, not 6, as I'd initially suspected. One of the unknown numbers had been a wrong dial, but the others led to a web of infidelity and recklessness that astonished even me. 4 of her lovers were married men with children, and 2 of them had careers I could destroy with a single move. One was a state politician, the other a priest. Cassandra hadn't just cheated. She'd tangled herself in a mess that could bring down entire households. The irony wasn't lost on me. A woman so driven by her impulses that she'd jeopardized everything, while I held the power to dismantle it all. I shared the evidence with Roberta in her office, showing her the damning proof. She stared at the screen, her irritation palpable. I can't believe this, she muttered. She even fooled me. She underestimated me. I said, my tone calm, but steely. She thought I'd just roll over and accept her lies. She was wrong. Roberta shook her head. John, I get why you're angry, but revenge won't fix this. It'll eat at you, and the kids will remember it. I'm not aiming for revenge, I replied. Not directly, but those men? They deserve to face the consequences. Roberta sighed. Just be careful. You don't want this to come back on you. I'll handle it, I assured her. As for Cassandra, she's about to lose everything she took for granted. The house, the respect of her family, and most importantly me. I planned meticulously. My first step was to ensure the kids would stay with me. There would be no compromise. Cassandra could have visitation, but no boyfriends would be allowed near them. Non-negotiable. She could keep the house, but I'd take everything else and move the kids to a secure, comfortable condo near their new school. With everything in place, I enlisted the help of a tech-savvy friend to edit the videos. He blurred Cassandra's face to shield her identity, but left the other men fully exposed. I had copies ready for their wives and significant others, as well as for a carefully selected TV station that could expose the priest. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about consequences. On D-Day, I sat at my office computer, the files loaded and ready to send. A single click would bring 4 marriages to their knees and send the priest into exile. I hesitated for a moment, not out of doubt, but anticipation. Then, with the precision of a man accustomed to decisive action, I double-clicked. The walls were about to come crashing down. I informed my boss I'd be taking the rest of the day off and drove home. wondering how long it would take for Cassandra to hear the fallout, or if she'd hear it at all. Just in case, I prepped one of the videos on the living room TV, ready to play with a single button press. Before heading upstairs for a nap, I left a note on the coffee table, play video. An hour later, I heard her car in the garage. As the door creaked open, I stood at the top of the stairs, waiting. From my vantage point at the top of the stairs, I watched Cassandra step inside, pausing as her eyes landed on the note I had left on the coffee table. She hesitated for a moment before approaching the TV, picking up the remote, and pressing play. Though I couldn't see the video, I knew exactly what she was watching. Barely a minute in, her legs gave way, and she crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The harsh reality of her actions had finally caught up with her. I descended the stairs calmly, shutting off the video and ensuring she was still breathing. For half an hour, I waited silently on the couch, watching as she began to stir. When she finally regained consciousness, her eyes found mine. There was no mistaking the shame and fear etched across her face. "Do you hate me?" she asked weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said without hesitation, my tone cold and deliberate. "There's no chance for reconciliation." Her lips trembled, but no words came. I continued, laying out my terms with unflinching precision. "You can keep the house. The kids will stay with you, but only on the condition that no boyfriends come near them. I'll take everything else, stocks, bonds, savings. If you fight me on this, I'll make sure you lose any shred of self-respect you have left. Don't test me." Cassandra nodded, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She didn't try to argue or make excuses, perhaps recognizing the futility of it. I don't know why I did it," she whispered, her voice cracking. I felt compelled, like I had no control. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze with an icy stare. "That's not an apology, Cassandra. It's an excuse, and it changes nothing. You made your choices, and now you'll live with the consequences." She flinched at my words, but said nothing further. Rising from the couch, I glanced at her one last time. "Don't answer your phone anytime soon," I added. "The fallout is already in motion, and I doubt you'll be welcome in many places after today." With that, I walked out, leaving her to face the destruction she had wrought. I didn't bother looking back. In the days that followed, the fallout unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. The wives of Cassandra's lovers moved swiftly, filing for divorce and ensuring their husbands were left with little more than their regrets. The state politician resigned in disgrace, and the priest was reassigned to a remote monastery, far removed from his former congregation. Another lover, whose career had depended on his public image, found himself selling used cars in a small town where his name carried nothing but infamy. As for Cassandra, she kept her job as the dean's secretary, though her presence became a topic of hushed whispers and sidelong glances. She saw the kids often during her visitation times, and I made sure they were shielded from the truth as much as possible. Explaining to them why their mother no longer lived with us was challenging, but we managed. Cassandra occasionally dated men her office friends set her up with, but from what I could gather, her adventurous spirit had been extinguished. Promiscuity, once her driving force, no longer held any appeal. She joined us for Christmas that year, as she would in the years to come. She was still family, though the dynamic between us was forever changed. She carried herself with a quiet humility, acknowledging her mistakes and knowing better than to push for more than I was willing to offer. The unraveling began the moment I made the call. I reached out to the babysitter, aiming to secure her services for the evening under the pretense of a surprise outing for Cassandra. When I mentioned reconsidering her availability, she sounded confused. "Reconsider? You've never asked me about today." That gave me pause. "Didn't Cassandra call you last week to arrange this?" "No," the babysitter replied firmly. "I haven't heard from her about today at all." My mind churned as I quickly improvised. "I see. That's probably because she asked a family member instead, but I'll take care of it. Let's lock you in for 10 p.m., and please don't mention this to her. I want it to be a surprise." She agreed, and I ended the call, my suspicions deepening. Cassandra had lied about the babysitter. Why? I couldn't piece it together, but I knew something wasn't right. That evening, Cassandra left at 8 p.m., heading out to her friend's July 4th party. She was dressed to impress, smiling faintly as she kissed me goodbye, her demeanor unervingly casual. Once she was gone, I waited patiently for the sitter, who arrived on time as arranged. With the house and our child in safe hands, I headed to the party myself. Arriving at the party, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. Would she even be there? Part of me suspected she might have gone elsewhere. But to my surprise, she was indeed present, chatting with her friends in a medium-sized gathering of around 20 people. Her friend greeted me at the door, visibly startled by my arrival. "Oh, John, what a surprise," she said, quickly summoning Cassandra. When my wife saw me, her reaction was a mix of shock and disbelief. Her eyes, already glassy from alcohol, widened as she stumbled over her words. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Who's watching the baby?" "I've got it covered," I said smoothly. "I wanted to surprise you. Let's enjoy the evening together." Her reception was frosty, to say the least, but I brushed it off. The gender ratio at the party caught my attention, more men than women, almost a 2-to-1 split. While everyone else appeared to be enjoying themselves, Cassandra's behavior grew increasingly uneasy. She seemed agitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for something or someone. When she asked to leave early, it set off every alarm in my head. "Let's stay a little longer," I suggested. "I just got here, and I'd like to try a drink or two before we head out." Reluctantly, she agreed, though her discomfort was palpable. I made my way to the kitchen, striking up a conversation with one of the guests, a talkative guy who was more than happy to share details about the party. After some small talk, I posed a casual question. "So, any interesting dynamics here?" I was thinking about making a move on one of the girls, but I don't want to step on anyone's toes. He chuckled, clearly enjoying the camaraderie. As I pointed out the various women, he gave me the rundown on who was single, who was taken, and who was open to a flirtation. When I finally pointed to Cassandra without revealing her identity, his response was chilling. "Oh, her? Yeah, she's hot, but she's off limits," he said casually. "She's here with a buddy of mine. They've been seeing each other for a while. Met at some concert, I think." I kept my expression neutral, nodding as if intrigued. "Interesting. Tell me more about this guy." The stranger was only too happy to oblige, describing the man in detail and recounting their supposed connection. His obliviousness to the situation worked in my favor. With every word, my suspicions were confirmed, and my resolve hardened. Cassandra's betrayal wasn't just a possibility. It was a reality. The stranger's words echoed in my mind, solidifying what I already suspected. The timeline of Cassandra meeting this man at the concert matched perfectly. The same concert where I had been with her, except for the inexplicably long time she'd taken to grab snacks. It all clicked into place. That seemingly trivial delay had been the start of her betrayal. Feigning interest, I kept the conversation going, letting the stranger fill in more details about their relationship. He didn't realize he was boasting about my wife, treating her as if she were some prize his friend had won. Each word sharpened my resolve. Before I could walk away, Cassandra's friend joined the conversation. The shift in her demeanor was immediate, tense, alert, almost as if she realized what I was piecing together. I gave her a casual nod and excused myself, asking her where Cassandra was. "She's on the patio," she said hesitantly, her tone betraying a hint of guilt. I made my way outside and spotted Cassandra. She was deep in conversation with a man I assumed to be her affair partner. Their interaction wasn't friendly. It looked heated, with her gesturing animatedly while he kept his voice low. Whether she was trying to convince him of something or defuse the situation, I didn't care. I had seen enough. Walking up to them, I introduced myself to the man with an edge in my tone. "You must be the guy Cassandra's been spending so much time with," I said, my words laced with ice. Cassandra immediately stepped between us, her hand on my arm. "John, we should leave. Now," she said urgently. I swatted her hand away, my patience gone. "No, Cassandra. You can leave if you want, but I'm not done here." Turning my attention back to the man, I stepped closer, using my presence to unsettle him. "Did you know she's married? Did you know you've been screwing around with another man's wife?" The man looked cornered, his eyes darting between me and Cassandra. His unease was palpable, especially when he noticed the empty bottle in my hand and realized we were alone on the patio. I didn't know she was married, he stammered, backing up slightly. I swear, I didn't mean any trouble. Didn't mean any trouble? I repeated, my voice calm but cutting. How many times have you not meant any trouble? Once? Twice? 10 times? He stuttered a response, admitting to several encounters. I nodded, my anger contained, but unmistakable. Good to know. Here's some advice. Find someone single next time. With that, I turned and left him standing there, shaken and silent. Cassandra tried to follow me, apologizing frantically, but I didn't give her the chance. Don't. We're done, Cassandra, I said firmly as I got into my car. The drive home was quiet and cold, the reality of the situation settling over me. Once there, I told Cassandra flatly, I want a divorce. She started to argue, but I cut her off. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've made your choices and I've made mine. I packed an overnight bag and checked into a hotel, needing space to think. Sitting alone, I began writing down my thoughts, trying to process everything that had happened. Divorce was uncharted territory for me, as was the idea of co-parenting. Growing up in a traditional household, this wasn't something I'd ever imagined for myself. But one thing was clear, I couldn't live with Cassandra anymore. Her betrayal wasn't just an act. It was a choice that had shattered the foundation of our marriage. I didn't know what the next steps would be, but I knew this. I would find a way forward, with or without her.